never planned on ever starting a company. Didn't even know that was really a thing growing up. I'm from just outside of Las Vegas. So the most successful people there are lawyers or doctors. Don't really have a tech community in Las Vegas. And that was my plan, was to go to school, maybe become an attorney or something like that. All of my family, they're all attorneys. And showed up to school and got pulled in a different path. I found out about something called investment banking, got really interested in that. Worked for an investment bank and then for a private equity firm. And then ended my senior year just before I had done an internship with Bane and Company, a big consulting firm. And I loved that. I had a ton of fun there. It was great to be consulting these big companies and making strategic decisions for them. I thought that was absolutely the dream job. Accepted an offer to go full time with them. And then my senior year, we started Neighbor, just totally out of the blue. So I was headed off in this professional services direction where you can have your job, have your income, and then moved in this whole totally different direction where we're just trying to get users. We have no money, and just a whole new world for me.
So maybe you can step through, you just, name drop Neighbor. So like, what is it? And like, what was it that like started giving you that idea in the first place?
Yeah, so Neighbor it's a nationwide peer-to-peer self-storage platform. So, if you have an empty garage or a driveway or a shed, you can rent that out on our platform. And people in your neighborhood that need storage, we'll connect them with you to store their boat or their camper trailer or their boxes in your garage. And it got started organically. My co-founder gets all the credit for coming up with the idea. He actually had this need himself. He and his wife had just gotten married. And a week after they got married, they flew down to South America to work for this humanitarian organization. They didn't have a lot of money. My co-founder, he's a pretty frugal guy, and looked into getting a storage facility for all their items, and the prices were insane. I mean, he's like, I pay $10 a month for my Netflix and $30 a month for my internet. There's nothing I'm paying $300 a month for. And they were also all full. He was going to have to drive a half hour just to find one anyway. So he called around to his friends and found one that was willing to store his items in his garage. Stored his items. Fast forward 4 months later, he gets back from South America, goes to pick up his items. And while he's doing it, he's just thinking the whole time, this was such a better experience. I felt a lot safer in a neighborhood I trusted, with a person I trusted. I saved a ton of money. Why, there's got to be empty space in every neighborhood in the country. Why doesn't everyone do this? Why isn't there some platform where you could figure out what's available in your neighborhood? And so that's how Neighbor was born. It was just born from someone trying to save money.
So definitely get a couple questions on the origin of Neighbor, because I was in kind of the investment banking world as well, went to school for finance and economics. You don't learn how to build an app. You don't learn how to market an app. You don't learn how to do any of this stuff. So was there an outside influence? Like, what gave you the confidence? So maybe this buddy who went down to South America was like an app developer, but that just seems so out of the blue for someone who was going down the IB path.
I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn from an ex-entrepreneur that sold his company for $2.5 billion not too long ago. And he made the comment that when he first started out in entrepreneurship, he absolutely did not understand the limits. And that now that he's become smarter and a more kind of executive leader, he sees a proposal and he sees all the risks that could take place and all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. And he's like, I've become more risk averse. And then his conclusion was, I've also become a worse entrepreneur, because the hallmark of someone that does this is they just don't see the limits. I saw another post the other day that said, we do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it was going to be easy. And that's kind of how we were. None of us had any experience in app development. We just thought it was this amazing idea. Like, why wouldn't people want this? The world has to have this. When Preston, my co-founder, told me about this idea, my first reaction was, oh my gosh, I thought all the good ideas were taken. It seems like Airbnb already exists and Uber already exists and DoorDash already exists. In the gig economy, I thought we'd covered everything. And I was like, holy crap, there's an industry that's 10 times the size of the entire taxi and limo industry that Uber disrupted that's waiting to be disrupted. And it's actually a heck of a lot easier for people to have some space in their house than it is for them to go drive around. So we just didn't know what we didn't know, and we started building.
And what was like step one? So now you've got the idea, you're a couple college kids. Like, where do you go from there? Do you start trying to do this locally without, an app or anything like that? Or, just walk us through kind of how this started.
Yeah, as scrappy as you can imagine. We stood up a WordPress landing page. It linked to a Google form where you could put in your email if you wanted to be a host or wanted to be a renter. We went and knocked doors in our community to find people. We just would go to people that looked like they had space in their house and knock on their door and see if they wanted to sign up. Once people did sign up, we would call them. The website was useless. We would call and say, hey, how much space do you have? What do you want to rent it out for? And then we'd get a renter and be like, what are you trying to store? Okay, when do you want to move in? And then we call the host and say, are you willing to store this? What do you want to charge them? And then we call the renter and say, they want to charge this month. Are you commit this much? Are you good with that? And then we'd execute some PDF contract, and the renter would pay us through Venmo, and we'd pay out the host through Venmo. Eventually, Venmo caught on. You're not supposed to do business transactions. My co-founder is still locked out of Venmo, so very scrappy.
Love that. Yeah, scrappy is where all the best ideas start. So what point does it kind of evolve out of this scrappy stage? You're working at Bane, for those who don't know, that's one of the most prestigious consulting groups you could probably work for. At what point do you leave Bane or think about leaving Bane and Neighbor starts to become like, this thing actually has legs. Maybe I should start devoting all my time toward this.
Yeah, so I had interned at Bain & Company the summer between my junior and senior year. And it was that same summer that Preston was down in South America. So I come back from my internship to go to my senior year, run into Preston a couple months into the school year, and he tells me about this concept he's had for Neighbor. Well, we and our third co-founder, we start working on the idea our senior year. It starts to get some traction. We were surprised. We were like, hey, let's just do this. It'll be fun. We did it, we included it as one of our classes. It's like a class project. But we started getting actual users that really wanted this. And there was a ton of pent up demand for this. And we competed in a few business competitions. We won like 5K here, 5K there. All of that just went into testing little Facebook ads and flyers and stuff like that. And there came this decision our last semester at school, are we doing this? And I was supposed to start at Bain full-time in a few months that summer. And my co-founders were both supposed to start at their jobs. And we decided we were all in. And so I called up Bane & Company, called my partner there and said, hey, not going to show up. So rescinding my own offer. They had given me a signing bonus, which I now had to return. I'd spent it already. My wife and I had paid for that semester with Pell Grants. And all of a sudden I had to come up with money to give this signing bonus. And we just had our first kid, and it was a whirlwind making this decision to go all in at Neighbor, but it just felt right. Like, this product has to exist. We just got so passionate about it that we didn't even spend that much time thinking about it. We kind of just made the decision.
And can you remember what the numbers were looking like when you made that decision? Like how much revenue you were seeing at that point, or kind of like what the growth curve was looking like at that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to say we had like $2,000-$3,000 in MRR back then. So like it was not huge. We launched
three guys, right?
Between three guys. We launched it with 6 months earlier. We were paying ourselves nothing. So we didn't pull anything. Everything just went back into testing some more ads here and there.
So I do want to kind of focus in on this period. I don't think we're going to get into fleshing out how you built this into like, the company it is today because it's not as relatable to the audience. But I think there are plenty of people who, at some point in their career, if they want to do something entrepreneurial, they kind of come to this crossroads. And so, could you talk a little bit about like the personal finance side of that point? You're making $2,000 to $3,000 in MRR between three guys, so you're living on. You said you weren't even withdrawing, but if you were living on it, it'd be like $800 a person. Are you guys all just sharing a one bedroom somewhere, eating ramen every day? Like, what did those kind of grind months look like at the beginning?
Well, we used the system as much as possible. One of the business competitions we had won gave us a free office space in the business school at their school. It was a university business competition. It was one room. It was about the size of the room I'm in right now. And so we would just huddle in that room, and that's where Neighbor got started. Um, for housing, my wife was still in school, so we were still living in student housing even after I graduated. We were using everything we could possibly use. My wife was still getting Pell Grants, so I could kind of live off of that. I'd saved some money up for my internships. But no, it was a grind until we raised our seed round. We raised a seed round shortly after, later that summer, $2.5 million seed round from one of the investors here in Utah. We're based out of Salt Lake City, so the largest investor in Utah led that round for us, and then we could at least give ourselves kind of a modest salary to live off of.
And what was the reception like for like your family and your spouse? Like when you decide you're going to do this, like you just mentioned, most of your family was attorneys. It's a very different road to go down.
Yeah, I remember going to kind of a family gathering, and I was telling my uncle about this idea, and how I was thinking about leaving Bane, or not starting at Bane to do this. At the time, we were called Neighbor, but we were spelled Neighbor with a Y, so Neiybor, because that's the only domain we could get a hold of. And he was like, "Oh, that's a no-brainer. You should absolutely not do that. It's a stupid decision. Go to Bane, be there for 5 years, 10 years, and then go do something like this." Um, my wife, to her credit, she's amazing. She was all in. She was like, "Yeah, sure. Like whatever you want to do. You want to go to Bane? Great. You want to do this?" I think maybe a year or two later, she had some second thoughts as we were kind of growing through the grind of that first couple of years. But she was all in and always has been.
So obviously, Neighbor is a lot different now than when you were, collecting Venmo from the person renting out their storage space and Venmoing the person who was renting it and doing all these things that probably aren't the best business practice. But so
Yeah.
thinking about Neighbor then versus now, like what types of storage places or storage areas are people renting out? And I know now you go on the website, there's like so many different storage scenarios you wouldn't even think of, but just kind of curious on the progression of that. Like who were those initial customers? They store in cars, boats, RVs?
A lot of garages. Garages were definitely our first big early adopters. It just works well. It's kind of external to the living space. We did a lot to begin with student storage, so people needing storage while they left for the summer or were on their internship for the summer. And that's kind of a great example that you can start with a niche customer. You look at our platform today, almost none of our renters are student storage people. I mean, we have a lot of them, but they're probably less than 1% of all the renters on our platform. But we started there, and we started with homes around the local universities. It depends by market. A lot of markets will get very popular is the vehicle storage because it's a place where a lot of people travel to. So there's a lot of campers or boats. You have cities where boats do very well in coastal markets like LA or Miami. In New York, space is so tight, you see some really interesting use cases. You, of course, get the traditional ones, but I saw a person the other day. They had listed 3 or 4 spaces in their studio apartment. One was the space underneath their bed. One was a closet. And they were fully occupied. Every single space in their studio apartment was being rented by someone. And that was mind-blowing to me as someone that grew up in Vegas and then Salt Lake later when I went to school. I just couldn't believe that space could be in that high of demand.
And I'm kind of curious about some of the more detailed mechanics with with this kind of setup. Like, does somebody get to, let's say they are storing something under my bed? Do they get to come get something out from under my bed every day, every week, every month? Like, what kind
Yeah.
of protections are involved from both sides? Like, I know it'll be fun to dig into the specifics with how this platform works.
Yeah, so the host is totally in control. When they sign up their space, we'll walk them through a questionnaire and we'll ask them a bunch of these questions. Access is one where we'll say, how often are you okay with them coming by? And we have a bunch of different options from, every few months to weekly or even daily. And then what times are you okay with them coming by? We have individuals that rent out space. We also have businesses. We have small businesses that'll have some parking spaces that the city made them build that they'll rent out, or they'll have a little spot in the back of the retail space where they could store some more inventory from another business, and everything in between. So some people will say business hours only. Other people will say after hours only. Other people will say 24/7. So we have all the options. You get to pick as a host, and those are made clear to the renter up front when they're booking a space.
So I know something that a lot of our audience is going to be very interested about is earning potential. And some of the other ones have gotten more popularized. I know you've already mentioned, like, people, I think, at this point understand, especially in our audience, that you can rent out a room in your home or your whole home on Airbnb. Turo is starting to get Turo, get around, other platforms like that are starting to get some notoriety. People know that they can rent out their car when they're not using it. Storage is one of these things, like you said. You're like, why is this market not disrupted yet? Like, these other two huge players are disrupted. But and what I was getting at here was, like, people generally, they know how to look it up on like Airbnb or Turo. What are some just general numbers? I know it's going to depend on market, but what are some general income numbers for like a single garage space, or maybe the person in New York City who's renting out their under bed space? Like, what can a host kind of project for a monthly revenue?
Yeah. Yeah. So a host in New York that's renting out a garage, they're going to earn $500+ a month. A host in LA may earn $200 a month. So it's going to vary by market. One thing we've done is we're the first storage company to offer storage in all 50 states. We have users in almost every city. And so we have pretty good pricing data at this point. So you can actually go on and plug in your address and how big it is, and we'll give you a recommended price that's like, okay, this is going to get you rented the most. You can actually sign up for something called smart pricing, where we'll just handle the price for you and we'll fluctuate it as it needs to. So first time users, very common to earn several $1,000s a year. Definitely our hallmark as a platform is the passive nature of it. Most gig economy up until this point required a pretty big commitment. You got to go drive for Uber. You got to go drive for Instacart. You got to go drive for DoorDash. They're really a second job if you think about it. Even Airbnb, you had to, one, be wealthy enough to afford a second home, and two, it's a lot of management. They'll come stay for a night or two, then you got to clean up after them, and then you got to get another customer. So it's constant customer turnover and acquisition, which is why people hire management companies to run their Airbnb. I think Neighbor is really the first marketplace ever where you can have an RV pad on the side of your home that you're not using anyway. We'll find you a renter. That person will store it. They'll maybe come get it once every few months during the winter, maybe once every 6 months. And yet you're earning a very predictable, dependable direct deposit into your bank account every single month for doing nothing. Some people get addicted to that income and they go bigger. They'll have more property. They'll even buy property to put on Neighbor. So we've got users, we've got a school teacher that lives not too far from where we are, maybe earning 35, 40K a year in income, whatever kind of standard middle school teacher income is. She's earning $10,000 a year on our platform. I spoke about businesses. We've got a gym in Los Angeles that rents out space in and around their gym. They earn an additional $50,000 a year. Basically pays the full lease on their space, and then they just get to earn money from their gym. We've even had people start businesses. We've got a host in Hawaii that literally went into this all in and earns a 6-figure income off of Neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like kind of the hallmark is, hey, I've got this space I already own that I'm not using. Let me rent that out to someone. Why not? But where my brain goes is, if I could get $100 a month for a 10 by 10 space in Austin, Texas, like why don't I just, spend $1,500 to put a 10 by 10 shed in the backyard and rent it out and have it be cash flowing off of a a storage unit that you just go buy and put in the backyard.
Yeah, we actually that was such a popular option. Just what you mentioned, the whole idea of a shed, because you can get sheds off of Costco for $800, $1,000. So we created a page. I'm happy to send you so you can link it with a full calculator where you can plug in, your area, how many sheds you want to buy, and we can help you calculate the return on investment.
Now, when it comes to storage space, I guess what does one need to do to get set up? I'm guessing it's like take a picture, write a description, put your area, put your pricing. Is there anything else beyond that? Like, are there certain, I know with Airbnb, for example, there's some cities that don't allow Airbnb. Like there's certain things that you have to be aware of or things you have to do prior to setting something up. Like you need the short-term rental number from your state. In Massachusetts, for example, I have Airbnb.
Yeah.
So like, what does a host need to do to get set up?
Yeah, so like you said, we'll walk you through the full process of listing all the information and the photos. We do require photos of your space for the renter. We'll also ID verify you. So that's one thing you'll go through as part of the flow. We like to know our hosts, are verified, they are who they say they are, and they have ownership of the property that they're trying to rent. It is, as a best practice, it's good to check with your city, although this is not like an Airbnb where there's a ton of regulation around this or short-term rentals. We like to say Airbnb is in the business of storing people. Uber's in the business of transporting people. And anytime there's people involved, the regulations go through the roof. You've got room and board tax and all sorts of handling mechanisms to make sure people are safe. But storing your neighbor's boxes of clothes in your garage or their boat on the side of your home, that is a much lower liability item than dealing with a person getting in your car and you driving them around. And so naturally, cities and states have a lot less regulation around that. One of the advantages of using Neighbor is our ability to help you with that. The most common piece of legislation is around the disposal of items. If a renter stops paying, you're actually not allowed to dispose of those items. You have to run a formal auction process, and Neighbor does that on your behalf. So we have this policy where if the renter stops paying us, we will continue to pay the host as long as items are in the space, even though we're not getting paid. And we'll actually run the process to remove those items from the space on your behalf. Doesn't happen very often, as you can imagine. We have users that are literally storing with their neighbors. So there's even more than Airbnb or Uber, there's kind of an incentive to pay. But in the event that it does happen, that's one of the advantages of our platform.
And speaking of like liability, how does it work as far as from like an insurance perspective? If someone stores something in my house and destroys something by trying to remove it, or I've stored my stuff in someone else's house and it gets messed up because they've got a leak in the house and it floods and messes my stuff up, is it all on the individual people to have their own insurance, or is there something kind of provided the way that like Turo and Airbnb provide as part of the service?
Yeah, I'd say this is another area where we really shine as a platform. First, just general safety of the platform. Storage facilities are about the worst place to put your stuff. They're all zoned industrial. 50% do not have security cameras. And the break-in rate is 1 in 10 storage facilities is broken into every single year. So just not the best place. If you look at the FBI stats on break-in rates in residential areas versus self-storage, it's a 10x difference. between those. People just don't like to go into residential areas where there's dogs, alarm systems, social, kind of people all around. And so that's just the stats. If you look at our platform, we're not 10x safer. We're like 1,000 times safer. Again, we're the only storage company in the world that operates in all 50 states. And I could count on my hands the amount of times we've dealt with an exterior break-in. That's how safe this platform is. On top of that, just like Airbnb, we provide our hosts $1 million guarantee. You're basically starting a business as a host, and we want to make sure you feel good about that. We're kind of protecting your liability there. And then on the renter side, when you book your garage or whatever, you can select a property protection plan. And we're the only storage company in the United States that offers up to $50,000 in protection for your items. Most don't offer you any protection, and the ones that do, the policy's like $3,000 in coverage or $5,000 in coverage, and we offer up to $50,000.
So obviously your job is to hype Neighbor up as much as possible, and the platform sounds amazing. Just wondering, because people are going to be signing up, I'm sure, after hearing this, what percentage does Neighbor take versus what you take home? Because you can have all these features, then you guys got to take your cut to be able to offer all these amazing benefits to hosts.
Absolutely. works very similar to Airbnb. So the host, when they sign up, they're going to set a price. They get to, we'll provide a recommendation, but they can pick whatever price they'd like to. We then take that price and we mark that price up for the renters. So the host is basically getting what they're asking for. The host is generally setting a price, and that's what we give them. The only thing the host pays is the credit card processing fee. And then on the renter side, they're getting storage that's 30 to 50% cheaper than traditional self-storage already. And so our service fee is generally unnoticeable. And the way we do our service fee is it's a sliding scale. So it's not actually a fixed percentage. For smaller spaces, it's going to be a higher percent. So if you're renting out a space for $40 a month, we tack on a large percent on top of that so that we can make something meaningful. Whereas if you're renting out a space for $1,000, that percentage is very small because we can make a piece with a very small percentage of that. So that's how most marketplaces do it. They slide the percentage down depending on the price of the space.
And then because, I think most people are so familiar with something like an Airbnb or an Uber platform, I'm assuming there's like ratings. Are there things like Superhost status? Like, are there things that kind of separate hosts apart so that like, hey, this is going to be like a top-notch experience?
Yeah, there are. So we do reviews. Every renter can review their host. And also we have a top host program where you can get a little badge. That's based on your responsiveness to users, your review status, the completeness of your listing, et cetera. There's a number of different factors that go into that. We evaluate hosts on a quarterly basis, and that gets updated. It's very difficult to get into that program. We intentionally make it so. Host has to have had reservations and to maintain reservations so that we're getting constant data into that.
And another thing that I was just looking at the Neighbor platform while Justin was asking his question. So these are listed in monthly prices, right?
That's right. Yep.
And I'm guessing you have a ton of data on this. Like, what is the average Neighbor storage? I don't know what the right verbiage is here, but like, how long does the average person rent a space for? So how predictable is the income is where I'm getting at with this question.
Yeah. So we've been operating the platform for about 6 years. And we have users that started renting from us in those early days when we were running around doing door flyers and Venmo and stuff like that. We have renters from that period that are still renting with us today, 6 years later. So transactions can be very long. We also get a lot of short-term renters as well. These are people that they're like, I'm moving into a house. I need storage while the home is being built. And so in 7 months, I'm out of here. And it's pretty bimodal. You see this in other storage companies as well, where you have this kind of large cohort of short-term renters. These people are going to rent anywhere from 2-3 months to 6 to 8 months. And then you have individuals that are long-term renters. They're typically going to rent about a year to anywhere to 2, 3, even sometimes longer, 5, 6 years.
And as a host, do I get any say as far as what my minimum amount is so that I don't have to worry about doing this over and over again? Like I'm okay waiting a little bit if it means I get the person who's going to stay there for a minimum of 6 months?
Yeah, so every renter that books a reservation, they actually fill out an estimation. No renter is going to know exactly how long they want to store. It's not that predictable unless it's very short and they're like, I know I only need this for 2 months. But we have them fill out an estimation like about a year, several years, 6 to 8 months. And you as a host get to see that. You also get to see a list of everything that they're going to be storing. So we make the renter fill out a full list. You see how long they'd like to store. And you as a host have the opportunity to approve or deny that reservation. And so kind of full control to the host on what they want to accept and how long they want to accept it. Also, some hosts ask, we actually thought this next point that I'm going to bring up, we thought this was going to be the biggest issue with Neighbor when we were kind of road mapping this out. So this is the biggest problem with a peer-to-peer storage marketplace. And it's that what happens if you're a host and you need to move, right? Or you need to fill the space. As with everything, as an entrepreneur, you get most all predictions wrong. That has not turned out to be an issue. Turns out most hosts, when they get the income, they want it forever. And we've even had a lot of instances where the host moves and they pitch it as a selling point to the buyer, and we actually just transfer the renter over to the new buyer and they just stay in the space. So it hardly ever happens, much less than we predicted. But we provide a great way for you as a host as well. If you need to go, we can help transfer the renter to a new space. You just have to give them 30 days notice. For the renter, everything's month to month. We don't lock you into anything. We also don't do, most storage facilities, they'll give you this nice price to start at, this web-only price, advertised here. It's extremely misleading because 4 months into the reservation, they'll jack up your price. And 4 months later, they'll jack it up again. And they'll do that until you're a year and a half in and you're paying double what you're paying at the start. They understand that storage is very sticky. Once your items are somewhere, it is a pain in the butt to move those. And storage companies, they prey on that. They take advantage of that. Neighbor, your prices are never increased. The price you move in at, that's the price that you will pay for the rest of your reservation. We do allow hosts to offer a first month discount where they can offer the first month half off. But other than that, you're paying what you're going to pay for the life of the reservation.
So through a host-eyed view, because I'm guessing we're in the financial independent show, we're going to have a lot of people who want to do this as a semi-passive, mostly passive side hustle. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make? Like maybe they're leaving a lot of money on the table because they structured their neighbor listing like this instead of that. Like maybe they could have made 2 parking spaces out of this where they only listed it as 1, or maybe they did this and they should have done that. Like what are some common mistakes you see from new hosts that were, as someone who created the platform, you're like, oh man, if you made this small tweak, or if you listed it this way, your MRR would be way higher.
Yeah, hands down, there's 3 things that are just low-hanging fruit. The first is you'll get hosts, they want to earn money. I mean, that's why they came to the platform. They want to earn money, and that's great. But they shoot themselves in the foot by trying to do that front-loaded. And so they'll set this really high price. They're like, I'm only willing to accept this price. When in reality, you should get a renter and get experience with the platform and get some reviews and figure it out, and then go increasing your prices. One way to avoid that's just signing up for our smart pricing. That way we can help you get reserved quickly and then make more money. The second is taking good photos. I mean, photos are everything. First impressions are everything. We can provide all the information to the renter and about all the amenities you have, that it's climate controlled or that it has security cameras or all of these things that we allow you to select as a host. But if the photos don't look inviting, if the photos don't look like a place that the renter wants to store their items and is going to feel good about storing their items, it's going to really hurt your chances of getting reserved. And the third is actually something you mentioned, which is we get a lot of hosts that they will list a large space. We'll even have hosts come on and they're like, here's an acre, and here's the price. And we've now built tools to help mitigate that, because you should not be listing an acre. You should be listing individual spots, and you will earn 10 times as much money by doing that. So we just rolled out this cool new tool called Blueprint, where you can actually go in, you can put your lot, especially for these larger spaces where you own a big paved area or a big gravel area or even an unpaved area. And we'll give you a satellite view through our product of your space where you can zoom in on it. And we've created these tools where you can just drop like a row of RVs digitally on there, and a row of boats and a row of cars. And you can lay it out so that you're maximizing each square foot of that space. And you can see where the drive lanes are. And we'll help you understand, okay, you're going to earn $30,000 a month on this lot, or whatever it is. We'll give you a little price and what to charge for each of those listings. We'll kind of do it all automatically, because those users, they can become power users. I mean, many of those users earn a lot of money.
And I'm thinking through like the more typical example of, okay, I've got my garage, I've got one half of it. Let's say that, I've got available. I want to get somebody in there. I want to start making some money. I've got on the platform. I found someone. Now it's like day one. It's the day one that the person's supposed to move their stuff in. I don't know if you could just walk us through what that day looks like. Like, do I need to be there to watch them put it in, to show them where it goes? Like, what's the interactions like? And then, just what should a person expect when they're getting this thing first started in person?
Yeah. So you do not need to be there, especially for those larger spaces. Oftentimes there's just move-in instructions, how to do it, where to do it, etc. For the space you described, for a half garage next to your home or in your home, I'll go back to why we called this company Neighbor to begin with. We called this company Neighbor because it's the first hyperlocal marketplace. You use an Uber when you're in Chicago and you don't have a car, and you get in an Uber. 15 minutes later, you get out. You're never going to talk to that Uber driver ever again. You stay in an Airbnb, and when you go to another country, great multicultural experience, but you're probably never going to talk to that Airbnb host ever again. On Neighbor, we have literal neighbors renting from each other. And so it's amazing the sorts of things you'll see on that move-in day. You'll get individuals, they'll wait, they'll be there. They'll help move the items into their garage. Sometimes they'll even have water there waiting. We've had individuals provide additional services for their renter. So they'll let a camper or an RV plug in a trickle charger so that RV stays charged, and maybe they'll charge a little extra for that, or they'll provide a cover for their vehicle. And we're big believers in that. I mean, we encourage that. It's nice to be able to do something you're earning money from, but you're also being a good neighbor. Like, this person values what they're bringing. They may have just purchased this boat. They may have just purchased this furniture that they're waiting to move into their house. And being able to provide a great neighborly experience on that day one is kind of fun and builds some new relationships as well.
So kind of piggybacking off my last question, and your Blueprint software kind of put some light bulbs in my head and made me think of some ideas.
Sure.
Are there some maybe low cost, but like capex, like capital expenditure intensive stuff? For example, like maybe it only costs $1,000 to put one of those like RV hookups in. Let's use the guy who listed an acre on your platform. Let's use him as an example. Like, maybe it only costs a couple $100 or $1,000 to get an RV hookup, but then that space becomes exponentially more valuable, and maybe you could even get $1,000 per month because you can have like an actual person living in an RV in that spot. Like, are there things like, are there any kind of low-ish capex stuff that people can do to improve the value of their lot so then they can rent for higher amounts on Neighbor?
Absolutely. So for the smaller spaces, the easiest thing is a security camera. You can purchase a Wise Cam on Amazon for like $20, and that goes a long way to providing peace of mind for the renter. For the larger spaces, like you mentioned, that acre, the two main things are fencing it and putting some sort of pavement down, whether that's just gravel. Gravel's insanely cheap to put down. A fence costs less than 50 cents a square foot to put around the perimeter, and it can make it look professional. We've had an example of this. We had a guy that owns about 10 rental properties, and he had one of them that had a large space behind the property. So he's renting out the home, and then the home had a backyard, and then it had space even behind the backyard. It was just dirt. He took that. He actually put down concrete and put a little fence around it. He took his cash on cash earnings for that property from like 12% to like 70% cash on cash on the property, because he's got 20 vehicles in the back.
Wow.
And it looks very attractive because it's all fenced and concrete. We've had individuals just put down gravel on some dirt, not even huge. We're not even talking an acre. We're talking like they have a spot for 2 or 3 vehicles kind of off to the side, and they put down gravel. It not only looks nice for the renter, it looks nice for like the neighborhood. It looks like you've got some really nice boats stored on that gravel, and it looks intentional rather than just being on the dirt.
Since you've been doing this for 6 years, and it sounds like based on some of these stories you've been bringing up, like you've been pretty close to some of these stories, like you've got some pretty good background to them. Is there any fun stories out there around what someone's actually taken this income and been able to do with it, been able to turn this into?
Yeah, that's hands down the most fulfilling part of running this business. Most of the money that we collect doesn't go to us. We're like the first storage company ever where when you're buying storage, it's not going to some big storage corporation. It's going to your neighbor. And it's fun to hear what people use that for. Definitely the most common example is someone that's just like, I pay 30% of my mortgage every single month with neighbor. It comes in, it goes straight there, or I pay my utilities with neighbor. But the more fun ones are, we had a guy ping us in and just tell us how much he was loving it. And he said, my wife and I created a vacation bank account. It's literally labeled vacation. And the only thing that deposits into it is neighbor. And every single time it hits $2,000, we cash it out, we go on a vacation, and we just wait for neighbor to load it back up to $2,000. And that's when we go on a vacation again. We had another fun one. We had a guy who emailed in and he said he and his wife had decided to send their daughter to preschool, but then they looked into preschools, and the most affordable one they could find that fit their standards was about $300 a month. And they kind of just looked at each other and said, you know what, $300 is not in the budget. So they decided to not send their daughter to preschool and just to wait till kindergarten. And the next day he saw a Facebook ad for neighbor, and it said, make some extra income, side hustle, passive income. He clicked on it and he signed up his garage space. And he's like, I am literally earning $300 a month on neighbor. We sign our daughter up for preschool, and neighbor goes to pay for 100% of our daughter's preschool every month. So it's empowering. It's empowering that he doesn't have to go get a second job and drive for Uber. This is the sort of income that kind of fits into people's lives and can pay for what they want it to pay for.
That's amazing. Sounds like you guys got some good Facebook ad targeting there too. It's like, hey Siri, listen for can't afford, and then show that person neighbor. That's awesome though, man. No, it's seriously incredible. I was pumped when you reached out because, again, this is a platform that Justin and I have actively talked about on the podcast before, and I just love that you're disrupting this space because Airbnb is pretty commonplace now. Turo's getting there, but storage was kind of the next one, the next big undiscovered one on the list. So super cool that you and your team tackled this. For those who want more information about Neighbor, where do you want to send people? Where are the best place or places for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, we've tried to make it as easy as possible to find us. So on the web, we're just neighbor.com. On the app store.
No Y anymore, right? It's spelled normal.
No Y. We're theneighbor.com, and we've actually got some fun little Easter eggs around that if you can find them. Like if you go to lovethyneighbor.com. It goes to our website, and there's all sorts of fun stuff. Lots of ways to get here. And then on the App Store, we're the #1 ranked self-storage app. So if you search storage or boat storage or RV storage, you're going to find us, or you can just type in neighbor, will be the #1 result. And then you can follow us on, we're on all the social channels. So LinkedIn or Twitter or all that. If you want to see our updates and what we're up to, and just follow us.
Well, thank you, Joseph, for giving us some time. I'm excited to hear what some of our listeners take and do with this new income stream. This is definitely a perfect fit for the audience. And who knows, maybe I'll have to get my garage space. I'm always looking for some, some more ways to cut some corners, save some money, get some more cash flow coming in. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Cody.